blind 70-year-old black man walks his usual route through the park until a group of laughing boys decides he's their next joke. They stole more than his cane. They tried to steal his dignity. What they didn't know, that fall would awaken something unstoppable and change an entire city forever. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. There are mornings so ordinary. They slip by unnoticed, quiet, forgettable, like the rhythm of a ticking clock. But then there are mornings that scar the world in silence, carving a space so loud in the heart it never heals the same. That morning in Charleston's Battery Park, the sun rose with the same softness as always. Birds sang. The breeze carried the scent of magnolia and salt water. And Leonard Brooks walked just as he had for years, with dignity in his steps and blindness in his eyes. Leonard was 70. His world had long turned dark, but he saw more than most. He walked that park every morning, rain or shine, dressed in his faded newsboy cap and long tan coat, his left hand gliding the curved wood of a cane carved decades ago. That cane Honduran rosewood, smooth and aged, had been a gift from his late wife Dolores. She'd placed it in his hand before passing, whispering that it would steady him not just on sidewalks, but in the years to come. To strangers, Leonard was simply a harmless aging man, tapping his way along the cobblestone paths. Most didn't speak to him. Some nodded politely. Others avoided eye contact entirely. He didn't mind. He had long made peace with being invisible. But that morning, invisibility abandoned him, replaced by something far worse. It started with a laugh, not the kind born of joy, but something sharp, hollow, meant to slice. Leonard paused. The air had shifted. He could feel it, like the weight of unseen eyes pressing on his back. Then came the sound of footsteps, quick, heavy, approaching from behind. "Hey, old man," a voice called out. Young, male, white, laced with that kind of swagger that often masks fear with cruelty. Leonard turned his head slightly, but said nothing. His grip on the cane tightened. He kept walking. The voice got louder. "You lost Grandpa. We're just pretending to be blind so you can creep around the park?" Another laugh, then a different voice. "Yo, check this out, get it on camera." Leonard's heart sank. He didn't need to see them. He'd heard this tone before, back in '68, in a Mississippi diner, where they told him a blind man had no business eating near decent folk. He'd heard it when he played jazz in French Quarter bars that wouldn't let him through the front door. That laugh, it hadn't changed. Just the faces had gotten younger. "Come on, man, say something," a third boy yelled. He moved close, too close. Leonard flinched as a finger poked his shoulder. He stopped walking. Silence stretched between them for a beat. Then Leonard spoke, his voice calm. "You boys think hurting a blind man is funny?" That was all it took. A shove to his shoulder. A laugh erupting again. And then someone grabbed the cane. "No!" Leonard gasped, stumbling. They didn't break it. That would have taken courage. Instead, one of them yanked it just enough to unbalance him. His knees buckled. He fell to the pavement, hands scraping rough concrete, breath knocked from his lungs. His cap rolled off. The air went still. "Yo, did you get that?" one boy asked. Every second another replied, grinning. They didn't even run. Just sauntered away, joking about uploading it to TikTok. One of them mimicked Leonard's fall. Another made barking noises. It was a game, a joke. Nothing real to them, just another clip in a never-ending feed. Leonard lay there, hand reaching out into empty air, heart pounding. His face burned from the scrape. Blood trickled down his cheek. But what hurt most wasn't the fall. It was the sound of people walking by, some pausing, some pretending not to see, others whispering, but not stopping. No one helped. No one dared, except one. Across the park, hidden near a vendor cart, a boy named Jalen watched. 14, dark-skinned, quiet. A kid who sold lemonade on weekends and dreamed of becoming a filmmaker. He had been filming birds that morning. That's when he saw Leonard and saw them. He didn't yell. He didn't run over. But his fingers trembled as they pressed record. He captured everything, from the first laugh to the final shove, from the scrape of cane on stone to the silence that followed. He didn't know what he would do with the footage, but deep inside, something told him this matters. This can't be ignored. Leonard, still on the ground, finally gathered enough breath to push himself up. His cane, thankfully intact, lay a few feet away. His hands shook as he reached for it. Jalen wanted to run to him. He almost did. But fear held him back. Fear of the boys. Fear of what would happen if someone turned on him next. He stayed hidden, heart-racing camera still rolling. When Leonard stood, it was slow, painful. His body trembled, but his spine remained straight. He adjusted his cap, brushed the dust from his coat, and began to walk again, one step at a time. No one applauded. No one offered a word. But Jalen watched him walk, and he would never forget it. That video, still saved in his phone, was just 42 seconds long, but it carried the weight of a history far older than Jalen's life. It was more than a fall. It was a fracture, one that didn't belong to Leonard alone, but to all the people who had ever been laughed at, pushed aside, or turned into spectacle because of their color, their age, or their blindness. That morning didn't break Leonard, but it would awaken something far more powerful than cruelty ever expected. Jalen Morris hadn't meant to be there. Most Saturdays he helped his grandmother fold laundry, or sometimes sat on the porch sketching storyboards for a film he knew he wasn't brave enough to shoot. But that morning, he'd wandered down to Battery Park, phone in his pocket, looking for nothing in particular, and everything all at once. What he found instead was silence, broken by laughter, the wrong kind. He hadn't planned to press record. His fingers had done it before his heart could catch up. The moment he saw the cane ripped from the old man's hand, something inside him tightened. But he didn't move. Not then. He just stood still, hiding behind the corner of the lemonade cart where he sometimes helped out in the summer, watching a 70-year-old man fall to the ground as a group of boys celebrated like it was a game. He had seen plenty of things go viral, pranks, challenges, petty fights. But this wasn't content. It was a confession. Jalen walked home in a daze. His legs moved on instinct, but the scene replayed behind his eyes like a film he couldn't pause. He slipped through the door of the small apartment he shared with his grandmother and sank into the couch, still clutching the phone. The sound of the cane scraping stone echoed in his mind like a metronome set to sorrow. His grandmother, Loretta, noticed something was off immediately. "What's wrong with you, baby?" she asked, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Jalen didn't answer right away. He opened the gallery, clicked on the video, and played it. She sat beside him in silence, one hand covering her mouth as the video played through. When it ended, she didn't ask why he didn't help. She didn't scold or sigh. She simply nodded and said, "You captured it. That matters more than you think." "I was scared," Jalen whispered. "You were smart," she replied. "Sometimes being brave means keeping your hands steady while the rest of you is shaking." That night, Jalen didn't sleep. The video sat in his camera roll like a live wire buzzing with potential and risk. What if no one cared? What if they blamed the old man? What if they turned on him for filming it? He thought about his father, a man wrongfully imprisoned 5 years ago over a fight he hadn't started. Jalen had been 9 when it happened. The police hadn't wanted video. They'd only wanted a version of the story that fit what they already believed. This time, Jalen had evidence. He didn't post it right away. Instead, he wrote and rewrote the caption again and again. "Look at what they did felt too vague. This is wrong, too impersonal." After nearly an hour, he typed 6 simple words. His name is Leonard. He matters. And he posted it. By morning, the video had 2,000 views. By lunch, $30,000. By sundown, it had passed 100,000, picked up by a local activist page, and reposted by an actor Jalen admired. The comments came in waves, some filled with rage, others with heartbreak. People asked who the old man was, where the park was, whether anyone had helped. Most chilling were the ones that said, "This reminds me of my grandfather," or "This happened to my uncle." Charleston's local news called it a disturbing display of cruelty. A city council member shared it with the caption, "We must do better." But the person who hadn't seen any of it was Leonard Brooks himself. Jalen knew where the man lived. Everyone in the neighborhood did. Mr. Brooks was a quiet legend, someone who never asked for anything, who walked with rhythm in his step, even if he couldn't see the street signs. Jalen had once seen him hum a tune so sweet it hushed 2 arguing men mid-sentence. That Sunday afternoon, Jalen walked up the steps of Leonard's porch, knees weak. He knocked twice, then once more. No answer. He was about to turn away when the door creaked open, slow, cautious. Leonard stood there, his cane tapping softly against the wood. "Yes," Leonard said, his voice calm, but guarded. "Mr. Brooks, I think I have something you should hear." Inside the house smelled of sandalwood and old records. A jazz album crackled softly on a turntable in the corner. Jalen sat across from Leonard, phone in hand, screen dimmed. He didn't offer explanations. He just hit play and placed the phone on the table between them. Leonard didn't move at first, but when the audio of that morning rang out, the laughter, the taunts, the unmistakable thud of his own body hitting the ground, his posture stiffened, his fingers clenched. The jazz record kept playing behind the video, but the contrast only made it more painful. When the clip ended, Leonard sat very still. "They didn't know who you were," Jalen said quietly. "But now they do." Leonard looked in the boy's direction. Though his eyes could no longer see, his gaze felt focused, precise. "I've spent most of my life walking around things like this," Leonard said. "Not through them, around them, because I thought it was safer." "It shouldn't have to be that way," Jalen replied. Leonard exhaled long and slow. "It shouldn't, but it is." Silence filled the space between them. But it wasn't empty. It carried weight. A generational bridge neither of them could fully describe. "What do you want me to do?" Leonard asked. Not bitter, not weary, just curious. Jalen straightened. "Tell them what they did matters. Let them see your face, not just the fall. Let them hear your voice. Leonard leaned back in his chair. You want me to be a symbol? No, Jalen said. I want you to be you, in front of them. Not hidden, not erased. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Leonard smiled faintly. You didn't look away, he said. That's worth more than you know. The next morning, Jalen returned to find Leonard sitting on the porch, wearing a crisp dark suit and holding the same cane from the video. His face was calm, but there was a fire behind it, steady smoldering. Let's talk, Leonard said. And just like that, the boy who didn't look away met the man who had been waiting far too long to be truly seen. Before Leonard Brooks lost his sight, he lost something else, first his audience. It happened slowly, without alarm. One by one, the club stopped booking his quartet. Vinyl turned to CDs, then to silence. Jazz was no longer in demand unless it had a slick modern twist. And Leonard, with his upright bass and calloused fingers, never chased trends. He played for the feeling, the story, the space between the notes. But somewhere in the shift of time, the world stopped listening. Still, the music never left him. In the quiet corners of his home, Leonard hummed melodies no one had requested in years. He tapped out rhythms on his kitchen table. The songs were memory and muscle stitched into the lining of his life, like the threads in his coat. Each tune recalled a different street, a different woman, a different war, external and internal. And even after his sight faded, the music didn't. He could no longer see the sheet music, but he didn't need to. The melodies lived beneath his skin. He didn't know how long they'd keep him company. All he knew was that they were the truest thing he had left. And now, for the first time in years, someone was listening again. After Jalen showed him the video, and they began to talk, something began to shift inside Leonard. It wasn't just about the incident in the park. It was about the question Jalen had asked him. What do you want people to hear? Leonard had thought about that question for days. What did he want them to hear? His pain, his anger, his years of swallowing humiliation just to walk home safely, or his music. It was strange, the idea that his story could be told through the same instrument he'd once thought he'd retired. But the more Leonard thought about it, the more he realized his story was music. His voice might tremble when asked to speak, but put a bass in his hands, and he could say everything. Jalen came by every other day now. He brought sweet tea or his grandmother's cornbread, sometimes a tablet filled with messages from strangers who'd seen the video. Some messages were kind. Others were cruel. Leonard didn't want to see any of them, but he let Jalen read a few aloud, just to remind himself that the world hadn't gone completely deaf. One evening, Jalen showed up with something unexpected. I found it online, the boy said, holding a long rectangular case. It's not new, but it's yours, if you want it. Leonard knew the shape before his hands even touched the latches. He opened the case slowly. Inside lay a bass, not an expensive one, not the kind he used to play at festivals, but it was real. It was wood and wire and weight. He ran his hand along the curve of it, as if reacquainting himself with an old friend. She ain't Dolores Leonard whispered, naming the last bass he ever performed with. But she'll do. They spent the next few days in the backyard. Jalen brought a stool. Leonard brought memory. It took time. His fingers were slower now. Calluses had softened, but the moment his left hand found its place on the neck and his right plucked the first note, the air changed. Even the birds seemed to listen. He didn't try to play anything grand at first, just simple blues progressions, a walking bass line. The kind of melody that made you close your eyes and nod without knowing why. Jalen sat beside him recording everything. It wasn't about perfection. It was about reclamation. Leonard had once feared he'd outlived his usefulness, that after Dolores passed, after the gig stopped, after his vision went dark, he was only surviving out of habit. But in those backyard sessions, he remembered that survival had rhythm, that dignity had tempo, and that healing could sound like a G minor chord hanging soft in the dusk air. One afternoon, Jalen asked the question gently, "Would you want to play it?" You know, in front of people. Maybe at the square, Leonard didn't answer at first. The idea seemed absurd. Who would want to watch a half-blind old black man play jazz in the same park where his cane had been yanked from him? What would that solve? But then again, what if it wasn't about solving? What if it was about reminding? He gave Jalen a small nod. "We don't call it a concert," he said. "We call it a reckoning." They planned it in whispers. No flyers, no stage, just a wooden stool and an amp. Word spread faster than either expected. Local musicians in the only language he fully trusted sound. The night before the event, Leonard sat alone in his living room, bass across his knees. He played a melody. He'd never written down a song. He'd only played for Dolores on their 3rd anniversary. It was tender, dissonant in places, but warm. When he finished, he whispered, "You'd laugh at me now, Lo, getting back on stage like a damn fool." The next morning, the park felt different. The boys were gone. In their place, families, elders, kids, sitting cross-legged on the grass. There was no microphone, just a stool and a cable. Jalen stood off to the side, eyes bright. Leonard stepped forward, cane in one hand, bass in the other. No grand entrance, no speech, just music. He played for 38 minutes. He didn't stop once. And in that time, the city listened. Not to a victim, not to a hashtag, but to a man who had lived, been wounded, and still found a way to create beauty with broken hands. When the final note rang out, the park didn't erupt in applause. It fell into a hush. The kind of silence that only comes after something sacred. Leonard stood, placed the bass down gently, and whispered to the crowd, not to shout, not to scold, but just loud enough for those who leaned in. "This is the sound they didn't expect me to carry. But I still had it. I always had it." He stepped away, but the sound remained, alive, echoing, unfinished. The morning after the music, the city didn't look different. The bricks in Battery Park were still cracked. The sky still hung low with southern humidity. But something had shifted. You couldn't see it from above, but if you listened closely in the way Leonard Brooks had spent a lifetime doing, you could feel it, a pause, a breath held a little longer, the kind of silence that follows reverence. Jalen was the first to notice it. Walking to the corner store, he heard 2 women discussing Leonard's performance not in the tone of casual gossip, but with reverence, as if they'd seen something ancient and necessary. One woman said, "I never knew a bass could sound like that, like prayer." The other simply nodded. That wasn't a concert. That was church. News of the performance traveled faster than Jalen expected, faster than Leonard had hoped. A local journalist, once uninterested in another park incident, now asked to interview Leonard, not about the attack, but about the man. A teacher at a nearby high school used clips from the video to teach students about dignity and storytelling. An elder from the AME church said the performance reminded her of her father, who played gospel during the civil rights marches. Still, Leonard didn't see any of it. He sat on his porch cane, resting beside him, hands folded across his lap, listening to the world, to what it did when it believed you had nothing more to say. And for once, it didn't speak over him. It leaned in. But the world's attention is a strange thing, fickle, fleeting, and often selective. Just as it began to notice Leonard's presence, it tried to define it. A public radio segment called him an unexpected local hero. A city council member referred to him as a symbol of quiet resilience. And one reporter labeled him Charleston's blind jazz prophet. Leonard bristled at the titles. Funny, he said to Jalen, how people loved to name you after they tried to erase you. Jalen didn't disagree. They both understood what was happening. The story was being polished, prepared for consumption. The anger made palatable. The pain turned poetic. But Leonard wasn't interested in being anyone's metaphor. He wanted the truth to stay messy. So when the city asked him to attend a community roundtable on racial healing, he hesitated. He didn't want to be paraded. But then a letter arrived, handwritten, from a man named Jameson Wright, who confessed that he'd been one of the bystanders that morning just 20 feet away, sipping coffee and doing nothing. In the letter, Jameson wrote, I saw what they did to you. I heard the laughter. And I told myself it wasn't my business. I went home and didn't sleep. Then I saw the video, and it broke me. I know an apology doesn't change anything. But if you come to that round table, I'll be there. I'll sit across from you, and I'll listen like I should have that day. That letter changed everything. Leonard didn't attend the event for the press. He went for Jameson. The room where the round table took place was modest folding chairs, old carpet coffee brewed too strong. But it was full, not with cameras, but with people. Black elders, white teenagers, a former police officer, a librarian, a barber, and Jameson Wright sitting in the front row, visibly nervous. Leonard was offered the floor, but he didn't speak right away. He stood cane, tapping slowly, and walked to the center of the room. When he turned to face them, he said, I'm not here to forgive or accuse. I'm here to remember, because this country forgets fast. But I remember what it felt like when a group of boys thought breaking my cane was sport. I remember the silence, yours, mine, everyone's. But I also remember a sound louder than all that laughter, the sound of one boy pressing record instead of turning his back. He paused. My name is Leonard Brooks, and I am not a symbol. I am not a story. I am a man. I bleed. I ache. I still hear the music of the world, even when it tries to shut me out. I don't want pity. I want presence. There was no applause, just stillness, and that was enough. When Jameson stood to speak, his voice cracked. I thought I was better, he admitted. I thought I wasn't part of the problem because I didn't throw the cane. But now I know doing nothing is a choice too. Leonard nodded. And now you've chosen differently. The exchange wasn't theatrical. There were no tears, no grand reconciliations, just honesty. And sometimes that's more powerful than forgiveness. After the round table, the mayor called Leonard, personally asking if he would be willing to participate in a task force on racial bias in city services. Leonard declined. I've already done my task, he said. Now it's your turn. Instead, he worked with Jalen and a few local activists to launch something quieter, but more lasting. A mentorship circle for young boys of color. Not a program, not a charity, just a group of elders Barbers, veterans, musicians, fathers sitting with kids and teaching them how to navigate the world with their heads high, even when it tries to lower them. They met once a week under the same magnolia tree where the incident had occurred. Leonard brought his bass. Not to play, but to let the boys touch it, feel its weight, understand its language. This is how you hold history, he told them. Not on paper, in your hands, in your choices. The impact was slow, but real. One boy stopped skipping school. Another started journaling. A third, who barely spoke, asked to learn how to tune the bass. The tree became more than a meeting place. It became a witness. By the time summer waned into fall, Leonard found himself less angry. Not because the system had changed, it hadn't. Not because the boys who broke his cane were held accountable, they hadn't been. But because something else had happened. The world hadn't just looked. It had listened, and in doing so, it had given Leonard something that decades of silence had never offered: recognition without reduction, presence without performance. One evening, as he sat with Jalen beneath the tree, the boy asked, "Do you ever wish that morning had never happened?" Leonard thought for a long while. "I wish they hadn't laughed," he said. "But I don't regret that I was there. Because if I hadn't been, maybe no one would have learned how to listen." And so the man with the broken cane kept walking, not to escape the past, but to make sure its echoes reached those still learning how to hear. The bench appeared quietly one morning beneath the old magnolia tree. No ribbon, no speeches. Just a smooth, handcrafted seat, placed with care into the earth where something once broke. There was no plaque yet, just a folded note taped gently beneath the seat. It read, "For those who chose to stand, even when the world sat in silence." Leonard Brooks arrived late that afternoon, guided by Jalen's steady arm. The boys said nothing as they approached. Leonard didn't ask questions. His steps slowed as the scent of the magnolia blossoms met him halfway sweet and unbothered, like the scent of something too ancient to be intimidated. When Leonard touched the bench, he ran his hand along the grain, like he would the body of a bass. His fingers paused at the note. He didn't ask to read it. He didn't need to. He could feel what it meant in the hush of the crowd gathering behind him, neighbors, students, elders, even a few strangers who had only seen the story online. Leonard sat down slowly. The bench gave a slight creak, but held him firm, as if the wood had been waiting for him. From that spot, he could hear the shuffle of leaves above and the scrape of sneakers on sidewalk. He could feel the quiet reverence of a city that had finally stopped long enough to witness. A young boy, barely 10, walked up, holding a piece of folded sheet music. "Mr. Brooks," he said, voice soft, "my mom said you used to play. Will you teach me someday?" Leonard smiled, not wide, just enough. He reached out and placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Someday," he said, "but today, just listen." Behind them, someone strummed a slow single chord on a guitar. No microphones, no set list, just the first note of something that would grow. Leonard leaned back, face turned toward the sky, not to remember pain, but to claim peace. The bench beneath the magnolia tree wasn't just wood and bolts. It was memory carved into form. A place where stories settled instead of shattered, where silence became sanctuary, where an old man with a broken cane had once stood, and where dignity would always sit. Leonard Brooks was never searching for attention. He was not a man of protests or podiums. He was simply a 70-year-old blind man trying to enjoy the peace of a morning walk in a Charleston park, a walk that had become part of his soul. But when a group of young men decided to turn his dignity into a punchline, they had no idea what they were interrupting. What began as cruelty became the spark of something larger than all of them, a movement, a memory, a reckoning. Leonard's fall was not just physical. It represented the quiet daily humiliation that so many endure, especially Black elders, especially the disabled, when the world forgets to see them. But this story was never only about what was taken from him. It was about what he still carried: memory music and an unwavering sense of worth. It was a boy named Jalen who saw what others ignored. He recorded not just the attack, but the silence that followed, and with that, he unknowingly helped write the first line in a new chapter 1 that would echo far beyond the park's magnolia trees. Together, they reshaped the narrative. Leonard chose not revenge, but remembrance. He chose to speak, to teach, to play. And the city, once indifferent, finally leaned in and listened. The bench beneath the magnolia tree now stands not just as a memorial, but as a commitment to dignity, to presence, to choosing to see each other, especially when it's uncomfortable. It's a reminder that even broken things like a cane, like trust, can be mended with the right kind of care. So what do we learn from Leonard's journey? We learn that silence isn't always peace, that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths, that witnessing matters, recording injustice matters, and standing beside someone, even when you can't fix their pain, matters deeply. We are each responsible for creating a world where dignity isn't optional and humanity isn't invisible. In our modern lives, it's easy to scroll past pain, to laugh at things we don't understand, to choose comfort over courage. But Leonard's story challenges us to do better, to listen more, to show up, to make space for the unheard, the unseen, and the overlooked. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think differently, even for a moment, we invite you to be part of something bigger. Subscribe to our channel, share this video, leave a comment about how this story made you feel. Your voice helps amplify stories like Leonard's stories that deserve to be told and remembered. Together, let's keep building a world where every step, every story, and every person truly matters. Thank you for watching.